book is obviously a quote-unquote Bible to a lot of people within our industry. You know,
Okay.
so I mean,
Okay.
first off, thank you for that. I just have a couple questions. You know, it's about probably 17 questions altogether. Anything you don't feel like you don't want to answer or feel like answering?
Well, any questions are fine, but once again, we discussed already. It's not about myself, okay?
Right. No.
Okay.
No. Absolutely. No. I totally understand that. So, I mean, first off, it's truly an honor to talk with you. You've had a long and storied career. If you could just give us a bit about your background, educational wise, and stuff like that, as far as for teaching and stuff like that.
But we agreed that
Okay. All right.
not about myself.
All right, what are you currently doing now? Is it possible? Can I just know what you're doing now?
No problem. No, my education is, so I studied math in the university, but I graduated in exercise and sports science, approximately something like that. And after that, I was a graduate student, nothing special.
Okay, all right, gotcha. Let me see. What resources, such as with coaches like myself and scientists like yourself, do you find that's most beneficial in pointing you in the direction of preparing athletes? I mean, obviously you haven't done it in a long time, so I understand that.
Do you mean whether I was young?
Yeah, when you were just moving up through the industry, I mean, and within, when you're in the Soviet Union or whatever have you, I mean, what resources did you find were great in that?
It was a great environment because, I was admitted to graduate study. It was, at this time, it was called Central Institute of Physical Culture.
Right.
And it was a period of time when many faculty at this college or institute, it was called institute, were also coaches, national coaches,
right.
coaches from national. So it was a great environment to study, because elite athletes were there and elite coaches were there, and also, science of training athletes, according to my subjective estimation, started in Soviet Union a little bit earlier than in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the 1960s, we had developed theory, maybe not perfect, but theory. And according to the theory, people were educated. And because we had many great coaches, at this time, drugs didn't exist in sport. So the stress was on technique, on training, on knowledge, etc.
Was there something with the educational system that you find was considerably different than an American education? Was it just focus? Or?
Sure. It's quite different. It's even now quite different. Because the Central Institute of Physical Culture, his main mission was to prepare coaches. In the United States, even now, majority of coaches are self-made people. There is no formal education to become coach. It's a little bit strange, not a little bit, it's strange for me, because, in order to work in many professions in the United States, you need a license. You cannot be hairdresser without a license. Yes, you cannot be masseur without a license. But coaches, okay. 3 days or something like that, or theory or so. But this is a profession. And this profession requires special knowledge. And this knowledge increases very fast. Look what is happening at the scientific conferences and international meetings, etc. Look how many scientific journals and this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you expect that all people can read, study, and absorb them by themselves? No way. The United States is a great country, and there are many great coaches. And some of them, I was really very pleased with their level of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But maybe all of them, I mentioned this to you, they are self-made people.
Right. So
they had to spend years in what can be studied in minutes, because they have to, start thinking about that, and reading something. So it's not efficient. simply.
So, how long was that process when you went to the Central Institute of Physical Culture?
It's a 4-year education.
Okay.
And the general idea of this education is that you have 3 layers of subjects. One layer of subjects is practically the same as in this university and other universities. It's a basic science, anatomy, physiology, psychology, very elementary, but biochemistry, etc., etc. The second level, it's similar to medical school, to technical school. They have a second layer. Second layer is like a sport psychology, sport physiology, in addition to basic physiology.
And was it applied at the same time?
Yeah, it was more or less applied.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these disciplines on the second layer, was a course that I'm teaching here. It's which is my very, very imprecise translation, translated as Science of Training Athletes. In Europe, it's typically called Theory of Training Athletes. Okay, Science of Training. But after that, you had the third layer of subjects, and it is a training in swimming, training in gymnastics, training in skiing, training, etc. And there are many, many chairs there, or departments, if you call it, department of swimming, department of gymnastics, department of, weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, etc., etc. And ideally, when students started training in swimming, they already know basic physiology and they know exercise physiology. So you can teach them using different language, different levels. Some of these disciplines, are more or less a substantial percentage of this knowledge is really scientifically based. For instance, swimming training. In some cases, it's just, experience, common knowledge, etc., etc. But I will give you just 2 examples, very personal. One personal, when I just arrived, I was admitted as, to Moscow University, to Central Institute of Physical Culture as a graduate student. I was told, look, let's go to the department of track and field, because one very, very distinguished coach will be, and who is also faculty, will be giving a lecture or something about technique. Those guy who was inviting me, he didn't know that. And this coach was Dmitry Markov. At this time, he already prepared several Olympic champions in throwing and track and field. And his lecture, the entire lecture, was about starting position at shot putting.
Yeah.
So, and it was not science, but this guy, he was a real fanatic. It was 1957, so video didn't exist. If you make 16 millimeter movie film, it was extremely expensive. It was 8 millimeter mainly. This guy spent all his money for purchasing cameras, for processing, and at all international competitions he did it. And so at many, many photographs, very, very short pieces of video, demonstration, when, how those people think, what is their head position, what is their gaze orientation, should they stay like that, or after that leave the head, or should they stay like that, and very often he told, look, my opinion is that, but look, this athlete does that, this athlete does that, this athlete does that. So it's your choice. But my opinion is this is better because, for instance, equilibrium is better maintained with this head position, etc., etc. Now, when they performed the glide, and should they glide like that or should they glide like that? It was a lecture. 1 hour lecture with many, many demonstrations. And so when people graduate with track and field, from track and field, they were not great coaches, but they knew something.
They understand the biomechanics and the movement.
More or less,
Yeah.
at this time it was very, very limited piece of science, but it was a knowledge. It was a knowledge of very, very experienced coach who spent a life in this, who were thinking about that. And now all of them, students, they knew, okay, this athlete did that, this athlete did that, but most probably this is the best solution.
So, do you think it's a problem? I mean, obviously, with people that are in the industry, are considered either personal trainers or strength and conditioning coaches or physical preparation coaches, whatever word you want to use for it. But a lot of times you find that they don't have a basic understanding of the sport. Do you find that's a problem, having a basic understanding of just a bunch of general sports? And do you think they should specialize in specific sports as strength and conditioning coaches?
These people in Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, they studied specific sports.
Right.
But it was a mission of this central institute. In peripheral institutes, it was not specialized. So an idea is that if you want to be really, knowledgeable person in this sport, you have to go. It's better if you study that.
Okay. Now, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about special strength training or specific special exercises that relating to sport. I mean, a lot of times you find, there's a lot of talks about just GPP, as it's been referred to, general physical preparedness, and training GPP throughout the whole entire season, and never really specializing. Where do you find that the American United States coaches?
I don't know much about American coaches.
Right, just in general, okay.
It's just so I really cannot compare.
Okay, just in general, where do you think what are people missing, coaches in general are missing in special strength exercises, exercises that relate to sport?
I will tell you the following. The very special evolution in the opinions, So when I was young, and it was when I was a student, I was educated like that when you start training, you have to work as a coach. You have to divide all the training means into two groups, general and specific. And it was a recommendation at this time that when you work with beginning athletes, the share, and if you consider one time devoted to training as 100%. So the 75% should be for general, 25% for specific. It was what was recommended. Over this period of time, these numbers changed substantially. So it's
So did they increase in specific?
Increase in specific. Maybe maybe it's too much. Increase in specific.
Really too much. Okay. So
but I'm speaking about beginning athletes. I'm speaking now about young athletes, about teenagers, about this type.
How about advanced athletes and master
advanced
athletes?
Mainly specific.
Mainly specific.
Mainly specific.
Even off-season times and stuff like that. Was it still technique
Still,
specific?
even the exercise selection is more wide than during the season,
right.
But it's still swimmers and weightlifters train differently.
So now, was the specific strength exercises was it specific in nature to the biomechanics of the movement, or was it energy system specific, or was it both?
Both. It depends on the sport. Sure, if we are speaking about power sports, it's mainly biomechanics.
Right.
But if you are speaking about middle distance runners, swimmers, so it's both.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I guess speaking of that, I guess it sort of works in your opinion. In your experience, what is an overlooked quality when developing athletes from a young age all the way up to an advanced age? So a lot of times, in my experience right now, you see a lot of lactic conditioning with athletes, like glycolytic conditioning with athletes right now. A very not a lot of aerobic work, specifically in young age. So they're starting, lactic conditioning right from the start, not developing good aerobic bases. Is there an overlooked quality that you find?
Typically, people classify the drills, exercise, aerobic, anaerobic, glycolytic, CP, etc., when you are working with more developed athletes.
Right.
But if you work with beginning athletes, with, so typically it was not classified like that. It's more superficial,
Okay, gotcha.
But especially when it comes to aerobic. So, people prefer to speak in terms of short distances, long distances, rather than...
So when you went with young athletes, was it just general work? I mean, can you talk about like the Russian system or Soviet system of working with young athletes? And from, say, an age of, say, 10 and above, I mean, what was that like?
It depends. It depends on the sport.
Okay.
In some sports, unfortunately, but it's a tendency, it's even younger than 10. Figure skating, gymnastics, it's younger than 10.
Mm-hmm. And specific work at younger than 10 years old?
Sure.
Really?
Sure.
Okay.
But also you have to strengthen their muscles, increase their flexibility, work on the coordination, etc. But the general theory, semi-scientific. Semi-scientific, it means that it's partially based on documented scientific knowledge, but mainly on a practical experience. That we have several stages of development, personal development. And kids, they have the same coordination abilities as adult athletes when they are 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
But at 12, 13, the pubertal period starts. So they start increasing the mass in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So in gymnastics, for instance, in diving, the general idea is that these kids should study all the different tricks, elements, until they're 12 or 13.
Okay.
This is what you see in gymnastics. You see 10 years old girls, 12 years boys are doing. If you want to see what next Olympic champions in 2016 and 2020 will be doing, go to the camps where the young 12 years boys are training, and you will see fantastic tricks. Fantastic. They are not able to perform it very reliably, very stable. They are not able to combine it in combinations. They can do it in elements. But everything that double somersaults with twists, if you go to this 11, 12 years boys, they can do that. They can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So an idea is, in particular in gymnastics, until they are 12, approximately, 13 maybe, they should study all the elements. And after that, from 12 to 16, they're growing fast. Their body weight increases. They cannot do that.
Right.
So they may spend a lot of time for strength improvement, for strength increase, etc., for training this in combination, increasing stability of performance, etc. So this is an idea. So, and because of that, you will see very, very young boys and girls who can do fantastic tricks. So I personally met 8, 9 years girl who can do double somersaults on the floor. Come on, I'm a former gymnast. I was not able to perform double somersaults.
So what you're saying is, up until the age of about 12 years old, there was a lot of skill work that was involved, and then after the age of 12, once
skill work and flexibility, and and also the level of strength should be sufficient to perform these drills, to the elements.
Right.
But not larger than that. There is no reason to spend more time. This is absolutely necessary.
So what you're saying, so it's about 12 years old, a lot of skill work, and then once puberty and all those processes happen.
But this is it's not my opinion, it's what they are doing.
What they were doing, right,
Yeah,
what they were doing. So from 12 to 16,
and
18.
also, look at the diving. Boys who are 13, they now do fantastic. The difficulty in diving, if you look at the last Olympic Games, fantastic. Fantastic. It's like 4.5 somersaults. They do it then when they're 13. And also, if you're speaking about gymnasts, practically it's almost impossible to study anything really new when they're older than 17, 18. They already do everything.
From a motor development standpoint, you find
Yeah,
it,
they
right?
know you're simply, I don't know what is happening there from scientific standpoint, but I know that when the 20, they can study something which is very similar to what they did previously, but not absolutely new.
So from 12 to 18 during that time, or 16, there was a big focus on just general development, general strength development.
General strength development, combining all the elements in combinations, in routines, improving stability of performance,
Gotcha.
to be sure, exercising like that. And the general education of young gymnasts is, now it's absolutely different from what when I was young. Because when I was young, the theory was the following. You have, it's counted that all male gymnasts, I'm speaking about high-level gymnasts, in order to become high-level gymnasts, they should study approximately 1,200 different movements. 1,200.
And they were classified in 1,200 different movements?
No, they are classified. This is what, but on the total number is 1,200. In female gymnasts, it's a little bit less, but also very impressive.
Right.
Now your problem with your coach. Your problem, I cannot study 1,200 at the same time. We should have a sequence. We should set, a system, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So what was the system previously when I was young? All the drills, all the elements were classified according to the level of difficulty. And we have to study the low level, after that the highest level, move from the level to the level, and study many elements that that were necessary, not necessary for high level gymnasts. Now they studied absolutely different ways. They organized, classified the elements according to their coordination structure, and they started studying this element from this lowest level. Well, for instance, let's assume that we are speaking about dismount from the rings. I'm speaking about male gymnasts. So what you have to study? You study somersault, that's a dismount. Okay. You study twist. Then you do, you can do somersault, you can do twist. Now let's combine somersault with a twist. Do somersault with a twist. This boy can be very weak. For instance, he cannot perform a handstand on the rings. But nobody bothers about that. You cannot perform a handstand. You can perform a somersault. You can perform a field. Do somersault with it. When I was young, it was impossible. How can you study somersault with a twist if you cannot do a simple handstand on the rings? So it's another way. So everything is organized in column, and columns are, they have connections.
Right.
And and because of that, you will see a young boy or young girl who can do something absolutely astonishing. But he or she cannot do everything. He does only this line of movement.
So in the Soviet system, there was a progression of that, though, right? So they had to be able to do a handstand before they could progress to everything else.
It was many years ago.
Yeah.
It was when I was young.
Right.
But contemporary, but mainly it's already 30 years, maybe like that. It's already absolutely different. And only after that you see this progress in gymnastics. Yes, please.
Along those lines, because I come from the rehab end of the equation, do you find that progression, when they were not allowed to progress before they could achieve certain, that led to less injuries as they did it? Because in my mind, that if they had a certain ability of strength and they were able to achieve these things, that it might lead to less injuries. So.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to estimate the risk of injury because I don't know, statistical data on that. It seems that the risk of injuries is larger in contemporary gymnastics than it was when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
But they do much more complex, elements, much more complex things. So it's evidently.
Yeah, I mean nowadays you see a lot of, at a very young age, specific development of whatever sport, soccer, football, especially team sports. And you'll see 12-year-olds or 9-year-olds or 8-year-olds getting into soccer-specific conditioning programs or football-specific conditioning programs. And what they found, what some of the theory is that maybe because we're specializing them too early, and then they're specializing from 9 years old to 18 years old, that
maybe,
you're having a lot of overuse injuries and stuff along those lines.
Maybe, I agree with you. My very, very superficial impression from observing young athletes in the United States, that the general physical preparation was as not good as, it was in former Soviet Union. But old people, they like to,
No, I totally understand. When I
now
used to,
it's not
used
as
to walk
good
in the
as
snow
when
and
we were young.
stuff like that. No, I totally
Maybe it's
understand.
just,
What is that GPP phase? I mean, that's a very thrown around statement, GPP, So, I mean, I look at GPP as it's a time frame, is that it takes a certain amount of time to build up a general physical preparedness, which you can always revert back to off-season or whatever have you. But what is that time frame of GPP in years that you find it takes to develop an athlete, get him enough motor development, and then physiologically to have a good base of GPP before he's able to specialize?
At least 3 years.
At least 3 years.
It's a minimal of minimum.
Okay.
At least 3 years. It's my personal bias.
Okay, all right. No, I agree with that. That makes total sense.
Also, it also depends on the sport. Let's consider power sports.
Mm-hmm.
For simplicity, let's consider sprinting, where you know that hereditary factors are,
Yeah, there's a ton of that stuff.
it's,
Yeah.
we understand that. Many people cannot compete with athletes from Jamaica simply because they're from Jamaica. But also the following is one of the main theories and main opinions in power and speed training was that why people cannot improve speed, so better and better. The theory was that this is because of so-called speed barrier. Speed barrier, it means the following. If you perform any movement at a high speed, at a certain speed, you memorize it, and you perform it in the same way very, very stable. But for instance, what gymnasts are doing? They repeat the routine many times, and after that they're able to perform day and night or whatever. What will happen if you prepare a high jumper and you ask him to jump every day 2 meters, for instance, high? He will clear the bound 2 meters, very, very simple. But he will not be able to jump to 5 or to 10 because it's a stabilization of speed barrier. So when people are working with young athletes, it's extremely important to use a large arsenal of skills, to do everything. In this case, you keep some reserve for the future improvement. Now, for instance, if you are scout, if you are, if you are working at the university and you are looking for talented athletes, and let's assume that you are in track and field, and let's assume that you have two athletes with the same performance results. Now let's assume, I don't know what is considered good performance, for instance 10.8. But one of the athletes is in track and field training for 10 years. He always competed in competitions as a sprinter, and he underwent very, very special training. And the second guy, he didn't train specially as a sprinter. He did everything, play basketball, play football, track and field, GPP, etc., etc. Who will you admit to your program? most probably you will admit this guy with a nice GPP because he see potential in him. And this is, the problem. The best organized sport so far in the history was in the former German Democratic Republic. East Germany. It was let's forget about social issues, political issues,
Absolutely.
just about, organization. The German people are very well organized. And they were also very well organized. It was a tiny country, it was 16 million people. But this country was among the best three in the world. It's competed with United States, Soviet Union, they were equal. Very often they
a lot less people, right?
Yeah, it's just imagine what is 16 million people. It's like one Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, if I'm mistaken, 20 million. Yes? They had 16 million. Now just imagine in Pennsylvania competes, and So they did the following. They selected talented people. Yes. They trained them in special schools. In some schools, on the latest stage of the development, these people lived in these schools, supported, etc. But the low level of development, they were just regular school children. But they did the following. They had program of trainings. And these programs of training were on a lesson-to-lesson basis. So in all kids who were 12 years old in GDR, on November 10th, they did approximately the same. And 85%, if I'm not mistaken, of all the training clothes and the drills were prescribed, and coaches should follow this prescription. And they were allowed to add or change only 15%. And what was the main idea? The main idea was that they were afraid that then they perform selection on the higher level preparedness. They didn't want to admit people who were better trained. They were admitted, their idea was to find people who were talented and had a larger potential, better potential for that, and not yet better trained. So if this guy trained twice a day, every day, and he is better than this guy who trained only 3 times a week, they wanted to admit the guy who trained only 3 times a week, not the guy who trained
because
daily.
the potential was more.
Potential.
Right.
But the coaches were rewarded for the performance of their kids, of their athletes. So they tried to train more. And the idea was, no, you should not train them more than we'll allow you.
See, I mean, that's very interesting because specifically in the United States, you see NFL players, who are done their career at 30 years old. And then you see European players, specifically in soccer, who are done their career at 38 years old. Because they haven't hit that. They hit that potential at a later age. Is that correct? Am I
something like that. Yes.
That's very interesting. Okay. Is there anything I mean, obviously you've been out of the industry for a while, but is there anything progressive when you were still in strength and conditioning? Is there anything very progressive that you saw? Any technology or anything along those lines that you feel in strength and conditioning? Yeah.
No, first of all, the training became more specific. I mean, many special drills were suggested in many sports. When you are speaking about, I'm not speaking about now Olympic weightlifters. I'm speaking about all others.
Yeah.
Now, for instance, previously training was not very specific, and in some sports you can observe a huge progress simply because of better exercise selection. The best example that I know is pole vaulting. These coaches developed many nice drills. The second example is hammer throwing. It's absolutely, they train differently than 40, 50 years ago. And 40, 50 years ago, the best performance results in hammer throwing were about 50 meters. And presently it's over 80. It's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the changes are huge. And some changes, so sure, also in weightlifting, and Olympic weightlifting. Many details were included.
Let me see here. With talking about progress, I mean, one thing that's popular right now is, and it's been talked about that it was used in the Soviet Union, was heart rate variability monitoring or anything along those lines. Have you heard of that, or did the Soviet Union use heart rate variability for the monitoring of parasympathetic and sympathetic state of athletes?
I know about that. We agree that we are not speaking about myself.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
But, you may find in a journal named Biophysics in 1966 that I published with my graduate student 2 papers on heart rate variability.
Really?
Very detailed heart rate variability. But you can use heart rate variability. Practically it's the following. The slower the heart rate, the larger heart rate variability.
Mm-hmm.
And because, it's it's on the parasympathetic, effect, and it's these effects simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Also, but when it comes to heart rate variability, you have to distinguish heart rate variability associated with breathing, rhythmic changes with it,
Mm-hmm.
and heart rate variability which is not associated. In general, it's well known in physiology, exercise physiology, that great endurance athletes, they have very low heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
That marathon runners, some of them have their heart rate at rest below 40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a gentleman from Spain who was in 35 or 36.
Yeah,
right?
it's, some of them, have below 40. So it's a very well known fact.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like to use just heart rate, you want to use heart rate variability in addition, go ahead.
Do you find it was a good?
We didn't use, I personally didn't use it with practical purposes.
Okay.
It was just a scientific research.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, there's actually an iPhone app, where there's a couple different BioForce athletes, stuff like that, where you can measure heart rate variability every single morning when you wake up, apparently. Which you can look at apparently sympathetic state, and as far as how the athlete is prepared or
Okay,
recovered
and I
stuff
don't
like
know
that.
how sensitive it is, but
Yeah.
if people know that it's sensitive, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready to accept. I'm ready to believe.
A lot has been
If you are
accomplished.
interested in day-to-day variability, we try to find informative
Mhm.
variable. And many classical things were not informative. We found it very informative with the hardness of the muscles.
Really? No, is there any other daily, non-technological type things that you guys use to monitor athletes, like vertical jump? or
It
anything along
was,
those lines?
done as research. Maybe you know such a name, but he was very famous. He was a very good athlete, Igor Teravanesian.
Mhm.
He was a long jumper, and before this, 1968, he was holding a world record in long jumping, 8:35.
Mhm.
And it was won by Bob Beamon in 1968. So he was very good athlete, and he was, he competed in 5 Olympic Games. He was 3 bronze medals at the Olympic Games, if mistaken, many times European champion, many times Soviet champion, and even a couple of times United States champion in long jumping. And he was a graduate student. And he was my graduate student, and we tried to figure out what he can do if he's traveling and on the training camps all day around. So we did the following. We recorded, monitored his training loads, and performed some simple measurements on a daily basis, trying to figure what kind of relations there is. So for him, a couple of other athletes, because, he performed health self-monitoring for 1 year, a little bit more than 1 year, and for a couple of months on other athletes. According to our semi-scientific observation, this muscle hardness was most informative.
Really? Any specific muscle? I mean, I heard just...
He tested quadriceps.
And it was totally based off the coach. I mean, his objective was just, all right, you feel.
Yeah, no, it was a three measure. One measure at rest, the second is during maximal contraction, and the third it was a measure, it was a difference between them.
Really? Okay. All right, gotcha. So much has been accomplished and studied in regards to the training of athletes. What do you envision is the next great barrier to overcome within the preparation of athletes?
I really don't know.
Is there anything that really puzzled you about when you wrote the preparation of athletes?
No, I am puzzled by the world best performances all the time. I simply cannot imagine how it can be done. I cannot imagine how people can run 9:58.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine how people can jump to 45. It's about the door.
Yeah, yeah.
How can jump with that?
Mm-hmm.
If you just keep in the hand, for as a shot, and you imagine that this shot is 22 meters.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot imagine that. You cannot imagine how it's possible to run 5Ks approximately at 12:30.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, a guy who this Olympic Games ran 800 meters, 140 to something.
Mm-hmm.
140. 2 laps, 50 seconds a lap. I cannot imagine. The marathon below 2 hours, 4 minutes. Wow.
Right.
Swimming, look what is happening there. And they're improving.
It's every sport,
Yeah.
Every sport. But in some sports, how can you imagine that a guy is lifting, 265 kilograms above his head?
I know, who's this big, probably.
Yeah. So, I don't know, No, sure, it's a huge selection, You have the athletes, if you look at them, you see that they are not usual.
Yeah. Look at Bolt. Look at Usain Bolt. He's not usual.
Yeah. Look at these basketball players. Okay, previously was one such a basketball player, 2, 3, 5, but now dozens of them.
Oh yeah, look at LeBron James.
Yeah.
The size and the weight and the athletic ability and the jumping ability and the speed and the power and everything along those lines and endurance. You're talking about super athletes.
Super athletes. Super athletes.
And it's funny because you wish you could put it on the coaches, be like, we did this. But we didn't do that. That's just genetic selection essentially.
Yeah, it's usually there are so many of them.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. Now, is there anything with the Soviet Union that you found that they were really trying to grasp and understand, but it was just out of reach for them? Is there anything in particular that that comes to mind? When you left the Soviet Union, you left coaching. What were they really working on at the time? Specifically power-related sports. Is there anything in particular?
But it depends on the sport.
Yeah. Okay. How about team-related sports? Is there anything in particular? I'm a little going off a little subject here, but I know with field-related sports like football, American football, or soccer, specifically American football. You see it's all about power.
But that there is no American football in Europe, so
right.
I simply cannot. In general, I will, immediately tell that I don't know contemporary sport.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I was an insider, it was in 1989, so it was 23 years ago. From time to time after that, I was still a member of medical committee of the IOC, so I was at the Olympic Games, met old friends, chatted, and they told me something. But I'm not an insider anymore for many years, so I really don't know what is happening there. Really, from time to time, I meet somebody,
Right.
From my standpoint, there are several very, very knowledgeable people now in sport. For instance, I would recommend you Dr. Vladimir Zatsiorsky, who is working with
I read his books.
With team in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
He is really swimming, and all aquatic sports, very nice.
What is your take on block periodization, the Israeli versions of block periodization?
The problem with block periodization is that there are several understandings of these terms. So prior to discussing block periodization, you have to ask people, what do you have in mind?
There's a couple different variations of block periodization, but I guess specifically, in most strength and conditioning environments, there's two, and there's Verkhoshansky and there's an Isserin, block conjugate training, whatever he wants to call it, and block periodization as far as Isserin is concerned. But specifically, related to the Isserin's version of block periodization, what is your opinion on that model?
First of all, I will tell you what I understand under block periodization.
Okay.
Because, this concept was suggested at the beginning of the 1980s. And it came from not very popular sport, Nordic Combine. Nordic Combine, it's a combination of two absolutely different kinds of sports. The ski jumper and 15K cross-country ski.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing between them except the snow and
Right.
skis.
Right.
And for them, it was the problem how to train those two practically opposite climbs. So they arrived at and initially they tried to combine it. You jump in the morning, you run in the evening, something like that. And they after that found that it didn't work fine. So they changed the following. And what was initially was called block periodization. So they trained the following. 2 weeks approximately, 3 weeks, mainly ski jumping. And maintenance loads, retaining loads, ski running, cross-country skiing. Next 2-3 weeks, the situation changed.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference from the previous training was the following. The example of the previous, I forgot how it's maybe called linear periodization or something, when you switch from one activity to another and forget almost absolutely the first activity.
Mm-hmm.
The nice example of that was a very, very famous training of New Zealand runners in 1960s, 1960s. 1960s, 1970s, excuse me. They dominated middle distance running. Very, very small country, tiny country, no special, sport, but they were the first. But they trained the following. They had training periods. The first it was, road training, aerobic training, after that hill training, anaerobic, and after that training of the
Linear model based, right?
Yeah, so that sequential training.
Right.
But the problem with that was that when you train ability B, ability A disappears, etc.
Right.
So attempts were made to combine it. And block training initially was understand what, as I described for you, this Nordic combined training.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is still, block training.
Right.
Other people, they understand a little bit different from them. So an idea made the following, that you train mainly one ability, but you maintain retaining levels of training at other abilities. That's the first difference. The second difference is the time periods, the blocks duration, are shorter than the previous. So previously it was 3 months, and this now is 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 4 weeks. Yeah.
3 weeks. This is what So I'm in favor of that, especially when you have to train such opposite abilities, strength or speed and endurance.
So you would recommend it for a team sport athlete or something along those lines, because there's so many multiple qualities.
Team
that you focus
sports is absolutely different. You have absolutely different. I'm speaking about high level. You have absolutely different calendar. You have a very, very long season training, so you cannot do what wrestlers are doing. Because they have a very, very short competition season, a very long period of training. You have to adjust to the calendar. You are not free to do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You know that it's better to train like that, but you have to compete next.
Right.
Next.
So the volume can't be high. The
Yeah,
intensity
so
can't be
it's,
high
you
and
know,
stuff like that.
so that is a problem.
Now,
And also, you know, you have many athletes in your team, and you may have a certain freedom to allow some athletes some periods of rest.
mm-hmm.
For instance, you will not go you don't compete next week, for instance.
Right.
You can afford it. But it depends on how many good athletes you have in the team and the situation in the calendar, etc.
Gotcha. Okay. In your opinion, what is an overlooked quality in developing, say, team sport athletes? Is there any specific quality you think that's overlooked?
You know, I don't know, because there are so many team sports.
Right.
I really don't know how I told you. I am not an insider anymore.
Right.
And I don't know. You know, the last time I was somehow, not more or less insider, when I was invited, it was approximately 12 years ago, by Chicago Bulls, or,
Yes.
you know, to be there. So I traveled to Chicago a couple of times, you know, we discussed. I had a short periods of time to be in the gym. You know.
Mm-hmm. Any educational materials that you say are a must for coaches, you know, nowadays? You know, I mean, obviously journals and so on and so forth. Any specific books or any coaches that you
But
would recommend?
you know these books.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So
I didn't know if there's any particular to you, you know, that were popular to you. And
no,
when
but
you were
my
doing that.
books that were popular for me, you know, they are written in Russian many years ago, and now they're
Out of print.
evidently out of print, out of dated, you know, not correct, but the main ideas.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there something that was
In
obvious?
general, the best material that I read in sports that was influenced, you know, it was written in German. There was a book published in 1930, exactly 1930. The name of this book was Athletic, edited by Krumel or Kruger, something like that. It was a fantastic chapter there on training, written by one Finnish coach. I forgot his name, unfortunately. I read this in 55 years ago.
Okay, all right. And getting back to the periodization aspects of it, I know I'm bouncing around here, so I apologize a little bit. I have a lot of things I got to ask. So, you know, there's block periodization, but would you recommend for the young athlete and for the athlete who's not at a master level, more of a concurrent linear basic model working multiple qualities at one time, would you say?
You know, as the young people, yes, can do that.
Okay.
Why not? For kids, yes.
Okay, gotcha. And how important would you say on an aerobic basis for power athletes?
Not extremely important, but important.
Okay.
You know, and also power athletes, if you are speaking about, you know, 100, 400 meter runners, is one situation. If you are speaking about, I don't know, throwing, it's another situation.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know if you're speaking about weightlifting,
Right.
which they hate. You know.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
But they have to do just for health reasons. You
Right,
know.
right. And recovery
Boys a little
purposes,
bit,
stuff like
you
that.
know, just move a bit.
Okay. Is there anything that was obvious to you, or wasn't obvious to you at the start of your career, that research and experience has enlightened you about? You know, is there any aha moments that you can remember within your career that were?
No, you know, once again, I was at this time in a very, very adventurous environment. So there were several great coaches, very experienced. They were also scientists. They published books, they published papers. So I had a lucky chance to communicate with them on an everyday basis, you know, to study from them, to understand how they think. You know, there were several. I mentioned to you one coach who was a great expert in throwing. You know, I worked with I don't know what. You know, in sport, memory is very, very short.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So young generation don't know the heroes from previous. There was a very, very popular athlete at this time, Valery Brummel, who was a world record holder in high jumping. You know, he won also gold Olympic medals in 1964. He was the last athlete who used straddle. After that, it was 68. It was a Fosbury, floor. So I was in good relation with his coach, who published a book on the training and who. So it was a special way. So I don't know. These people influenced me a lot.
No, and I mean that's interesting because nowadays you don't see a lot of relationship between sports scientists, biomechanists, and coaches. How important is that relationship, do you find?
I believe it's very important. In Soviet Union, we had one. So many things were terrible, but not from pure technical standpoint. In particular, I was the head of the different structure because it's difficult to say. No, I will call it head of the department. But I had no students under me only. And I, as a full professor, the head of the department, was obliged to travel regularly to training camps and to give lectures and consult them. And it was many years. And the idea was the following. That the Soviet Union, it was a poor country. Now, for instance, it was a problem to find good food for athletes. It was a terrible problem to find good equipment. So these elite athletes were selected, and they were practically, 250 days in a year they lived together, but in different places. In different places just to make their life a little bit diverse, And when they live, these young people live without their family, without wives and coaches also, people are getting crazy. So an idea is, it was also Russia, don't forget about that, so to start prevent drinking, at least, They have to do some intellectual work.
Right.
So the coaches were obliged to have weekly meetings at which something scientific, smart is discussed. And one of the goals was to send professors and, to discuss. Because, you ask them something, they teach me much more than I taught them.
Okay.
And also I had a, standard procedure, when I arrived at the first time. I told boys and coaches, I will not be teaching you how to prepare Olympic champions. Because if I knew how to prepare Olympic champions, I would do it myself.
Yeah, right.
I will not tell you. But, I represent here science, and scientists know something. So let's see, I will tell you what I know, and you will ask me a question. And by the way, all this majority of these coaches, when they believe you after several visits, when they're your friends, when they're approximately the same age, it's a different type of relations.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, you definitely see a divide, currently it's, you have the one person who's, I'm in the field, I'm in the weight room, I know what goes on. Yes. I don't need research to tell me exactly what's going on, so there's a big divide between those
But
two.
after that, I will come to this sport, and after in a couple of months or next month I will go to another sport. And I may tell you, look, you are doing that and they are doing that. I'm not telling you that they are doing better than you are, but think. And once, very often I told you that, look, I cannot tell you, final recommendations. I cannot tell you that something is absolutely proved scientifically. And one smart coach told me, Professor, you don't need to tell us what is completely proved by science. Because if it's completely proved by science, it means that now, that athletes in other countries are, enemies,
Right.
They already know that. So tell us new ideas, even if they are not confirmed scientifically. And we will think whether we like this idea or don't like it. So your goal is to stimulate our thinking. It was, from one standpoint, it was a good approach. from another standpoint, was a bad approach. Bad approach because we are not obliged to perform research at the level that was necessary for publishing in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. Now, for instance, a very limited number of people, very nice. But if you have this idea, okay, it's nice. So we did something, okay, look, try that.
Hence, when people talk about coaching as a science, there's a little bit of implementation, a little bit
Not
of science.
It is not science. The volume and percentage of scientific knowledge increases.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, you are using the scientific language that was not possible to use 40 years ago. Aerobic, anaerobic, glycolytic, etc., etc. This language was not known to coaches.
Right.
But now it's a common language.
See, that's interesting, though, because they think about, coaching as a whole, in the 60s, 70s, was so much advanced, but obviously there wasn't as much knowledge, it was working with athletes.
It was not much knowledge. Yeah. Many coaches, they were smart, they are very, very smart, they were very knowledgeable, but they were not able to express their thoughts in scientific terms. They didn't think of it.
So, okay. So it's experience and intuition mixed together as far as...
Yes, yeah. But now, also the intuition is here, and everything is here, but now you may use this scientific background.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for instance, I will give you an example, Okay, contemporary medicine made a huge progress as compared with what was 300 years ago. You cannot compare.
Mm-hmm.
But still many doctors cannot treat all the illnesses. They don't know how to do that. But at least when they think about that, they think in scientific, physiological, biological terms. So previously they were thinking about in a very, very crazy term.
Metaphysical.
So is it better now? It's better. Is it perfect? Not perfect.
Right.
We still don't know a lot.
Okay. Just a couple more questions, and I'll get out of your hair here. If you could, a brief explanation, your three, dynamic effort, maximal effort, submaximal effort. There's plenty of different interpretations of those three. Obviously, you should read your book if they want more, but could you briefly just go over those three concepts for us?
Well, the main idea is very, very basic. If you want to improve certain quality, you should require that the athlete's quality should manifest, should try to do that. If you want to train to improve maximal force, your athlete should exert maximal efforts, and they should exert maximal force.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are the ways to doing that? The first way, you just lift maximal weight. Okay, this is one thing. The second way, do non-maximal weight several times. But its load should be large, And it's large repetitions, your efforts will be maximum. So, for instance, if you're working with a young boy, and this young boy can perform 5 push-ups, so try him to perform larger number of push-ups. At the last, push-ups, he will be exerting maximal force. Physiologically, it shows that electric activity of the muscles increases, and there's a reasonable, good reason to believe that maximal number of muscle fibers is activated, so you create this condition.
Mm-hmm.
The third option is to move non-maximal load, but with maximal efforts, with maximal speed. In this case, this force will be maximal for this condition, but it will not be absolutely maximal. You can measure that, because there is not sufficient time to exert maximal force.
Mm-hmm.
You simply can compare the following. We have this force place here. We can measure the force, maximal force in leg extension. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that for this person it will be 100 kilograms. And after that we ask him, okay, jump, as high as possible.
Mm-hmm.
He will not be able to exert 100 kilograms because the time is very short.
Mm-hmm.
But it's maximal for this condition. So this is, what is an effort, maximal effort method.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are exerting force only 70 kilograms, you're jumping, we cannot expect that you will be able after that to lift heavier load that you did previously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nice drill, very nice, but it's not sufficient. This,
Okay. Now, I mean, submaximal effort specifically.
And this is and this is exactly because of that. People who have to exert large forces in brief periods of time, for instance, like a jumper,
Mm-hmm.
they use heavy weights and they improve their strength.
Gotcha. Now, how important is submaximal effort until to power and strength-based athletes? Now, hypertrophy training and so on and so forth.
No, as for hypertrophy, it's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that the idea is, and this is, by the way, very popular ideas in the just one digression. These people, high-level athletes. In the United States, they train in different places.
Mm-hmm.
In Soviet Union, they train in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And it was impossible to keep something secret, because everybody see what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So the ideas, they were distributed instantly. Look, this guy is doing something different.
Mm-hmm.
So, the main idea, main philosophy was like that. The maximal force depends on two factors. Now I will not be using scientific language. I will be using, just everyday language.
Mm-hmm.
From the central factors, from coordination, from the control, and from the muscles themselves. How your muscles react to the stimulus. So the strong muscle form. Now so it was idea the following, that I train coordination or I train muscles.
Mm-hmm.
It's a jargon. It's absolutely jargon, you cannot separate it. But it was very, very nice jargon.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very useful jargon.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need to train coordination, you have to work with maximal loads. This book, unfortunately, somebody borrowed. We recorded what elite athletes were doing. And if you just count the number of repetitions per set, you will see that when they perform snatch and clean and jerk, 1, 2, maximal 3 lifts.
Mm-hmm.
When you look what they are doing when they squat with a barbell, 5, 6, 7 squats. If you look at the most simple coordinations, very simple, single joint coordination, you will see larger number of repetitions. So they will tell you the following: here I train coordination, central factor. Here I train, muscles.
Muscles, peripheral, yeah.
Now everybody understands that it's not precise division,
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is visible.
Okay.
So if you want to train, coordination, if you want to activate the maximal number of motor units at the same time, at the optimal frequency, maximum.
Okay, all right, gotcha. Is there any, I don't want to hold up too much of your time, is there any parting wisdom or advice for the scientific coaching and athletic community that you would impart? I mean, just anything, that you found was important to your career and that you would want to impart on everybody else?
I didn't catch it.
Okay. Is there any specific advice that you would recommend to coaches to make them better?
I recommend them to discuss, their training issues of training more often with other coaches and with scientists.
Okay.
To exchange opinions and to exchange knowledge. It's extremely important. It's extremely important. And also, according to my really multi-year experience, smart, well-educated coaches, they are not afraid to ask questions. Coaches who are not, don't believe themselves.
Right.
They don't like ask questions because they are afraid that you understand that they don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand. You still see nowadays coaches arguing with each other as far as what effort's better or what way is better.
Okay, and if you two coaches are arguing, it would be very nice to have a third person who has a PhD in exercise physiology or muscular physiology and can contribute to that.
Right.
That's all. That's all. And if all of them are three smart people, all of them they will gain from it.
Mm-hmm.
And scientists will gain from that, and coaches will gain from that.
Okay. So, talk more, dialogue more.
Talk, dialogue, and not be afraid to show that you don't know something. If you don't know something, you don't know what. Nobody knows everything.
Right. All right. We're good to go then.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
I appreciate it, sir. I mean, it was truly an honor. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're most welcome. You're most welcome.